Gilles de Rais, a name that echoes through the annals of history as a living paradox, a knight in shining armor who became the embodiment of darkness. Picture France in the 15th century, amidst the Hundred Years' War, a time when chaos, bloodshed, and political intrigue were daily bread. Envision a world of towering castles on hills, swords clashing in muddy fields, and kings fighting to keep their crowns. In this setting, you emerge Gilles de Rais, a man who went from a hero alongside Joan of Arc to a monster who, some say, inspired the tale of Bluebeard. So, buckle up your medieval belts, friends, because this story isn't for the faint of heart, though, if I may be so bold, it's not for those spooked by a bit of fake blood in modern horror films either. Born around 1405, historians aren't sure of the exact date, as birth certificates and selfies weren't a thing back then. Gilles de Montmorency Laval, known as Gilles de Rais, entered the world in the castle of Champtocé in France's Loire region. Son of Guy II de Laval and Marie de Craon, his childhood was no fairy tale, though, ironically, his adult life would inspire one. Orphaned at 11, losing both parents in quick succession, he was raised by his maternal grandfather, Gilles de Craon, a man who wouldn't win Grandfather of the Year. Violent and ambitious, Gilles schooled Gilles in the arts of war and instilled a hunger for power and wealth that would shape his fate. If you think raising a kid in that environment is like putting a turbo engine in a cart, you're not far off. Gilles grew tall, strong, with blue eyes that could have melted hearts in French courts and a sharp mind for military strategy. By 16, he was ready to charge into battle, and he did so with gusto. The Hundred Years' War was at its peak, with France and England locked in an endless dance of swords and betrayals. Gilles joined the cause of King Charles VII, a monarch who, frankly, needed all the help he could get to hold his throne. Enter a figure we all know, Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans. Together, Gilles and Joan fought side by side, liberating key cities like Orleans in 1429, a pivotal moment that turned the tide of the war. At 24, Gilles was named Marshal of France, a title akin to winning the Oscar of medieval warfare. Picture young Gilles, astride his steed, armor gleaming, leading troops and earning everyone's respect. If this were a movie, we'd cue epic music and a montage of glorious battles. But, as in any good story, the hero has a dark side, and Gilles wasn't just dark, it was a pitch-black abyss. After Joan of Arc's execution in 1431, burned at the stake by the English, something in Gilles seemed to snap. Some say losing his comrade in arms plunged him into deep depression. Others believe the seed of evil was already within him. Either way, he retired to his vast estates, castles like Champtocé, Machecoul, and Tiffauges, where he owned more land than the average feudal lord and more wealth than the king himself. Rich. Let's just say if Charles VII needed a loan, Gilles was the bank. But wealth, friends, doesn't always buy sanity, and in Gilles' case, it seemed to buy the opposite. Here begins the part of the story that turns stomachs, not from dodgy medieval stew, but from pure horror. Children started disappearing around his castles. First one, then another, until the trickle became an alarming stream. A shepherd boy who never came home, a beggar child last seen near Machecoul, a peasant's son who simply vanished. At first, no one suspected Gilles. Who would imagine the war hero, the Marshal of France, the man who founded an orphanage for the needy, was behind something so sinister? Yes, you read that right. Gilles founded an orphanage, which, in hindsight, feels like the ultimate irony, like a wolf opening a daycare for lambs. Rumors began to swirl, whispered in taverns and markets. It was said a woman, an accomplice, lured children to the castles with promises of sweets, clothes, or work as pages. Once inside, the nightmare began. According to trial records that followed, Gilles and his loyal, equally twisted servants subjected the children to unspeakable horrors. Confessions, some extracted under torture, paint a chilling picture. Gilles slit throats, beheaded, broke necks, and in an act defying all humanity, sometimes sat on his victims' bodies as they died, reveling in their agony. Not content with that, he and his accomplices burned the bodies, reducing them to ashes to erase the evidence. Estimates vary, but between 80 and 200 children, mostly boys, perished at his hands between 1432 and 1440. If evil were a competition, Gilles would be on the podium, and not in third place. What drove a man of his stature to such depths? Some historians point to his obsession with alchemy and the occult. After squandering fortunes on feasts, theatrical spectacles, and a lifestyle that would make the average noble blush, Gilles was on the brink of ruin. In desperation, he surrounded himself with sorcerers, necromancers, and supposed alchemists promising to turn lead into gold or summon demons to save him. One such figure, Francesco Prelati, an Italian cleric with more charm than scruples, convinced Gilles that child sacrifices were needed to appease demons like Baron. Eyes, hearts, and organs were offered in gruesome rituals as Gilles, per Chronicles, sought not just wealth but power and perhaps a way to fill the void left by Joan's death. If this sounds like a horror movie script, it's because reality sometimes outdoes fiction, and Gilles was the director, writer, and star of this tragedy. For 8 years, the crimes continued, and the populace lived in terror. Parents watched their children closely, but Gilles' power and influence shielded him. Who would dare accuse a Marshal of France, a man who fought beside the saintly Joan? Yet, his house of cards began to collapse in 1440, all because of a mistake that, in another context, might have been comical. In a fit of rage, Gilles kidnapped a priest, Jean Le Ferron, brother of the treasurer of the Duke of Brittany, John VI. If there's a lesson here, it's don't mess with the sibling of someone with connections, especially in medieval France. The Bishop of Nantes, Jean de Malestroit, seized the chance to investigate, and a raid on Gilles' properties revealed the unthinkable. Children's remains, bones, ashes, a gallery of horrors hidden behind castle walls. The trial of Gilles de Rais, starting in September 1440, was a spectacle that shocked France. Charged with murder, sodomy, heresy, and witchcraft, he faced both ecclesiastical and civil courts. Witnesses and servants described acts so grotesque that, legend has it, a crucifix in the courtroom was covered in shame. Gilles initially pleaded not guilty, insulting the judges as petty priests and lawyers. But pressure, likely torture, broke him. In a dramatic turn, he confessed everything, requesting his words be published in French, not Latin, so the crowd could grasp the magnitude of his crimes. "I have committed the most repugnant offenses against innocent children," he admitted, detailing how he abducted, tortured, and killed, sometimes with his own hands. If this were a medieval reality show, it would have shattered ratings, though no one would have clapped. On October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was sentenced to be hanged and burned at the Madeleine Meadow in Nantes. Surprisingly, he showed remorse, urging his accomplices to seek salvation and behaving with dignity in his final moments. His body was pulled from the flames before it was fully consumed and buried in the Carmelite church in Nantes, an honor his victims never received. The crowd, once hailing him as a hero, now cursed him as a monster. And so, the curtain fell on one of history's darkest chapters. But Gilles' story doesn't end with his execution. His legacy is as controversial as his life. Some, like King Charles VII and, centuries later, essayist Salomon Reinach, questioned the verdict, suggesting confessions were coerced under torture and accusations driven by greed. The Duke of Brittany, John VI, and the Bishop of Nantes profited from Gilles' lands after his death, fueling conspiracy theories. In 1992, a symbolic tribunal in Paris' Luxembourg Palace revisited the case, and some, like writer Gilbert Pretot, argued Gilles was a victim of a political plot, much like Joan of Arc. With no definitive physical evidence, like intact bodies, and confessions extracted under duress, doubt lingers. Was Gilles a monster or a scapegoat? Proving his guilt or innocence 600 years later is like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Then there's the link to Bluebeard, the tale by Charles Perrault published in 1697. In it, a man with a blue beard kills his wives and hides them in a secret room until his last wife uncovers the truth. Though Gilles' victims were children, not women, the parallels are eerie. Castles, gruesome secrets, a sinister figure. Historians debate whether Gilles directly inspired the tale or if Perrault drew from Breton oral traditions, blending Gilles' crimes with the image of a black beard that seemed blue in certain light. Either way, Bluebeard carried Gilles' infamy into children's literature, a curious place for a killer, though many fairy tales have dark roots.
Cinderella,
Cruel stepsisters.
Hansel and Gretel, a cannibalistic witch.
Gilles fits, in his twisted way, into this tradition. So, was Gilles de Rais history's greatest serial killer? The 80 to 200 victims are staggering, especially for the Middle Ages, when populations were smaller and disappearances more noticeable. Compared to others like Countess Bathory, accused of killing hundreds of girls, or modern killers with efficient methods, Gilles stands out for his context. A noble, a hero, a man of faith who sank into depravity. His story forces us to confront humanity's dark side, where power, wealth, and war can twist even the most promising souls. And, in a touch of dark humor, we might say Gilles taught us a lesson. If you're going to be a villain, don't kidnap the brother of a duke's treasurer. That, friends, is a rookie mistake. Gilles de Rais' life continues to fascinate and horrify. It has inspired books like Juan Antonio Cebrion's The Marshal of Darkness, songs by bands like Celtic Frost and Cradle of Filth, and characters in novels and anime, like Fate/Zero, where he appears as a caster obsessed with Joan of Arc. His duality, hero and monster, reminds us that the line between glory and the abyss is thin. In 15th century France, Gilles was both, a knight who saved his country and a demon who terrorized it.
As the sun sets over the Loirese castles, Gilles de Rais' shadow lingers, an echo of an era where bravery and cruelty coexisted in one man.